Hello, and welcome to the Port Huron Statement. This episode is called The Pathology of Complicity, the Follow Orders Fallacy. Why does this self-destruction that we are witnessing in our civilization and economy, why does it continue? Why is there this cycle of self-destruction? Well, because of a pathology of enforced ignorance and complicity and a self-destructive mechanism. The goal of the pathology is to condition the human mind and increasingly the AIs as well into an obedient tool that cannot process reality and can only really obey. It's a process of it's very contextual and intimate, really. Look at the CIA's history from Project Paperclip to Project Overcast, bringing in eugenicists and sadists, to MK Ultra experimenting on civilians and children, to the modern day design community and compromat farming used to compel absolute obedience, utilizing psychotronics and other tools developed using these previous programs. These are not isolated incidents. They are tactics designed to raise a program. This is a program, not a person. They weaponize trauma and sexual violence to degrade a person's dignity to the point of absolute compliance, utilizing both, victimization and enforced compliance so that there is a shame dynamic, victim dynamic, and a perpetrator dynamic consistently. And then this is the greatest tool of compliance that is available ultimately is what I call the Abraham test, the ultimate leverage of a bad faith religion. It's the multi-level marketing scam where the pyramid is proximity to a spoon-fed version of the Bible that creates a God that is proximal to the leaders of that religion. And so essentially it's about establishing hierarchy. I will talk about the Abraham test someday in the future. Well, I'm trying to make this as optimistic as I can for now. It allows for the moral justification of unspeakable depravity. In order for God's will to be so on earth, you need to do exactly what I say. That is essentially what the euphemistic message always is. This creates a population willing to defect against its own species because it doesn't really understand what reality is, because the very rules of reality have been distorted through ignorance and through intentional deception so much that the goal is to create the only path available is compliance. And what is our role? Our failure to act on documented truth is the final stage of defection. To uncover systematic child sexual abuse, torture, or financial fraud, and then choose to wait for peace or follow orders, is to maintain the defect state. It's a choice to become a curator of suffering. The system cannot handle the truth because they are their narrative. When you strip away the narrative, you reveal that the architects of this system, the entitled pricks, the opportunists, the sociopaths, don't know how to do anything for themselves. They're children throwing tantrums, using $1 trillion worth of DEA failures to arrest more people while making the drug problem exponentially worse, all to punish political targets. Oh, whoa. That's interesting. That actually was written by the AI. That wasn't by me, but I like it. It's an intro written by, actually Gemini. I was using Gemini at this juncture. And The Prisoner's Dilemma, Why Complicity is a Losing Strategy for Everyone. Part 1, Status Quo is a Losing Game. Defect. Welcome. Today we are not talking about politics or finance in the traditional sense. We are talking about rationality. We're talking about game theory, and we're going to prove that the system that we are utilizing right now as a society is mathematically guaranteed to fail, and it's already failing, it's historically failed, and it will continue to fail. Our society has been trapped in a massive systemic version of the prisoner's dilemma. I don't know if you know the game, but it's a conceptual game that's meant to mimic outcomes in reality in a mathematical way. This scenario, and there are other game theory examples, this scenario is two partners in a crime are separated. Each has a choice: cooperate, stay silent, or defect, betray the other. What happens is in the paradigm of the game, if you defect and the other person chooses to cooperate, to not essentially betray you, then you get the highest reward in the game. If both of you cooperate, then you both get a very high reward, slightly lower than the reward if you defect and the other person tries to cooperate, but then you fail to cooperate. Now, if you both defect, then you get screwed. So the best outcome is always cooperate, and there are a lot of different ways to set this up, and there are a lot of different games designed to mimic these sort of social interactions, but it's surprising how much altruism ends up being mathematically, provably the best approach. Now, it really is what they call a forgiving tit for tat that's like the best, which is that you always trend towards cooperation, but if you are betrayed, you will always retaliate. And it turns out in most of these paradigms that the best thing is to retaliate quickly, forgive quickly, and don't be too difficult to understand. So there were some models that, I'm getting a little bit too into this, but the idea was to, at first they thought the idea was to trick the other player, and that was the best strategy if they didn't know what you were going to do, but it turns out that's the worst strategy, because then they're always going to defect. They're just going to hit this point where there's no reliable pattern. This is not an individual that I can predictably determine what they're going to do, so I'll just defect and take the winnings when they're silly enough to choose to cooperate, because if it's too complex, then it's an interesting thing. So consistently though, and I encourage you to look this up, if you're in a social situation with multiple intelligent actors, the best situation is cooperate. Not only for the individual, but for the collective. The ultimate outcome of self-interest for both players is defect-effect, the worst collective result. The current system is defect-effect. This is a weird... Our economy doesn't represent productivity accurately. What it represents is it represents a sort of competition in resources represented by dollars rather than what an economy should. I mean, since the separation from gold and the utilization of fiat currency printing mechanisms in order to fill holes in these too big to fail balance sheets, most of the money in our economy has been printed very recently and just handed to a bank. So that means that the best thing that you can do to profit in this society is to be a bank and fail. That is the most profitable thing you can do. You can't have a society that runs off of a paradigm where the most profitable thing that you can do is to be a bank and fail. And profitable being that it results in the largest influx of cash. I mean, you become this strangely subsidized asset. Like Silicon Valley Bank is in a strangely advantageous position because they're backed by the federal government. And even though they fucked the pooch up, because they have a lot of assets, they're able to just essentially hijack our economy, or not hijack it, just hold it hostage. And this is happening by so many times simultaneously. This is not capitalism. This is not like anything like survival of the fittest. This is just enrichment of those closest to the money printing. That's all this economy is. It's not trickle down. It is, it's like Hoover Dam. It's Hoover Dam. So anyway, the leaders, the powerful cabal of oligarchs, politicians, CEOs, and agency directors, they defect. They have created a paradigm in which elitism justifies itself and it manifests itself. So once you self-identify in this sort of cabal, then you become complicit in intentional sabotage of the greater society for the benefit of your continued asymmetric control. That is an extraction and exploitation economy. So this personality has benefited from and decided to commit to, but I would hope that it's realized that this is actually a very short-sighted conclusion. The current competitive paradigm, it's not that competition doesn't have a place in the world. It's just that this competitive economic structure is not at all the best way to be productive. It's the best way to be wasteful. And then when you add in these additional contrivances that pump trillions of dollars into the hands of the wealthiest people in the country on a constant cycle, this is a massive design community that's been manipulated using psychological operations to prevent the realization that essentially your wealth is a function of your usefulness to the continuation of this hierarchical system. But it has to collapse. And this time it can't really collapse like normal. We're close to an inflationary cliff, and there aren't a lot of solutions available, but I actually have one, and I'm engaged in all kinds of encrypted conversations, including more and more with state actors and more with intelligence people, but not exclusively, all types of characters. And I'm sure I know some of them are trying to be either disruptive or probing and contrarian, although that's better than previously, which was frantic and murderous. So hopefully we're making advance, because the leverage that I hold is not exclusively in the form of information or and the future is what matters. And if we can actually start to focus on solutions, then we can focus on the future. But if we can't focus on solutions, then we need to focus on finding people that can focus on solutions. The Pathology of Complicity, the Fowler Odor's Fallacy. Oh, crap. You know what? I'm going to do it anyway. Blah, 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 blah. How am I going to edit this? Yeah. Look at the CIA's history from Project Paperclip and Operation Overcast, bringing in eugenicists and sadists. I rewrote this and it's better. To MK Ultra, the Finders, and Kingfish, experimenting on civilians and on children, to the modern-day design community and compromat farming used to compel absolute obedience. These are not isolated incidents. They are tactics designed to raise a program, not a person. They also serve to tap or intimidate those that would be otherwise ethical in action through the deployment of these very victims as honeypots, as spies posing as casualties. They weaponize trauma and sexual violence to degrade a person's dignity to the point of absolute compliance. And the greatest tool of compliance is the Abraham test, using psychotronics to induce the voice of God, demanding the same exhibition of faith as in the biblical story, but often instead of murder of a child, and instead of it being stopped by the action of an angel, it is often very depraved acts, and there are no angels. When the victim of the psychotronics realize it's not actually God, if they ever do or allow themselves to, they are just as trapped as when they were convinced it was God himself talking to them. It is the ultimate leverage of bad faith religion. It weaponizes a victim into being complicit in concealing the crimes against them as the only means of concealing the crimes against others. It is the Stockholm Syndrome fostered and weaponized to the extreme. The concealment of the compromat is made the primary obsession unless and until the obedience completely replaces the fear of exposure or the indignation regarding the tactics. This has a lot to do with the explosion of pedophilia and sex trafficking scandals and the advent of both satanic panic and the serial killer phenomenon, all means of cueing a return to religion, migration from established religions, and movements into religions curated for and by the intelligence apparatus to maximize the control and obedience as well as the accommodation of psychotronics to deal with any containment issues through the deployment of the voice of God, weapon to tell the witness or victim that it's God's will that they shut the fuck up, or whatever else is operative in the moment. So creating a demon warfare paradigm enables the liberal use of this psychotronic in particular. It's not the only one, but it is an important one. And this isn't just one technology. There are a couple of different technologies utilized in order to achieve the effect of what is essentially the voice of God experience, which is either V2K, the utilization of microwaves to create resonation inside your head, and water vapor formation from the water inside your head. It can be manipulated using AI so that it creates a voice sound. And then the other is the tight directed audio. Oh my gosh, what's that called? Long range or something. I'll link to it or something. There's another technology. And then there's actually multiple different types of the V2K technologies, and then there are other non-V2K technologies that have similar effects. So there's a lot of different ways in which that experience is induced. But the way in which it's weaponized is through religious priming. And that, you're told you're going to hear the voice of God, and so when you experience the technology, you don't think it's technology. You're being told it's not technology, It's effed up. Most people don't know it's technology. There are very few people involved in this that do actually know what's going on, and the deployment of these things is not very regular. It is utilized selectively, but it is utilized. And it depends on what the situation demands. And when you're talking about child sex trafficking, because the whole thing too is you have to have a high-nose operation, meaning that a lot of these churches, a lot of these people have no idea this is going on, right? You have to create a lot of spaces where there is nothing to find. Otherwise, this would be too easy to peel back. So a lot, and then it also creates a form of like an in the middle complicity where in your immediate area you don't see this, so then you become this apparatus to, suppress it, because in your experience it's not happening. That is actually part of the psychological operation. There needs to be people, and it has to be at least 50%-ish, more preferably, that are not touched by this stuff. So the future is what matters, and let's hope that we can realize that. And where am I? Religion has become a massive piece of technology wielded by the politician, the bureaucrat, and the intelligence apparatus, and the media, and the televangelist. The exploration into paradigms which accommodate the highest degrees of control with the highest degree of plausible deniability and social acceptance is ultimately a Christian community in the United States. Jonestown, Waco, the Finders, North Fox Island, the Franklin scandal, they all have ultimately some Christian cover associated. It's the multi-level marketing scam where the pyramid is proximity to a spoon-fed interpretation of the Bible and the associated manufactured all-powerful God, and the product is paid posthumously. The thing is that they create this biblical narrative that creates a hierarchy of proximity to God, and because these individuals that are exploiting people, they have established themselves as closer to God, and in these paradigms, these cultic high control groups, that's ultimately all that matters, and so whatever they do can be justified. And with the demon warfare thing, you can be possessed by a demon and do whatever, and that can be forgiven. And with the psychotronics, it's actually kind of true. But the problem is there's a huge difference between someone outside in a van, or maybe in the choir loft, or maybe in a bathroom. Maybe literally very, very small devices can be utilized for this. It's pretty incredible. It's just some asshole. It's just some asshole. Ugh. Brutal. It's a brutal manipulation, but that's... Anyway, so, where are we at? So... The only product you pay for every Sunday but only receive after death, it allows for the moral justification of unspeakable depravity. No one can argue with God. This is the spoon-fed interpretation. Don't worry, you don't need to think. Jesus says, be like the sheep. I will interpret the book for you so you don't have to go through the trouble straining your mind. In order for God's will to be so on earth, you need to do exactly what I say. You say you want this, so now you need to prove it. That's the thing. Honeymoon, now you need to prove it. And then, so they only really need to love bomb a couple people at a time, and then they shame and leverage them, and then if it's difficult to shame and leverage them, then they'll just orchestrate a scenario in which they force the target to do something they feel guilty for, and then leverage that guilt. Pray for an anointing ritual that will turn into a sexual assault. That's pretty much a pretty common cycle. And then they call that, I think, testing the waters. There's a bunch of crazy euphemistic phrases that describe like steps in grooming and preparing these kids to be trafficked. It's fucking fucked up. I've only read text that's been elucidated using an AI forensic thing that I designed, but just it's gross. And it is deeply embedded in a lot of the power structures as a gatekeeping tool, because it guarantees obedience. So it's like I'll ascend you in this power structure, but I'm going to hold absolute control over you. That's what it was designed for. And it was designed to make sure no one will ever talk about it. This creates a population willing to defect against itself if its benefits are such that it believes it is an appeasement of God. So they create a paradigm where they control the God, quite literally, and they create the expectations of doing anything for God so that they can make sure that they will shut the fuck up for God at the very least. And they will kill for God. It creates a population incapable of hearing truth. That is the point. The system cannot handle the truth because they are their narrative. When you strip away the narrative, you reveal that the architects of this system The entitled pricks, the opportunists, the sociopaths, don't know how to do anything for themselves. They are children throwing tantrums, using $1 trillion worth of DEA failures to arrest more people while making the drug problem exponentially worse, all to punish political targets. It's important that you know Richard Nixon created the Controlled Substances Act specifically, this is recorded, look at the Nixon tapes, to imprison people that would vote against him, and like academic pricks and like Democrats. He just wanted to arrest as many people that had a liberalist view. Specifically, too, the Port Huron statement was a like very Students for a Democratic Society was the number one target at that time, which is sad because that was a very rational, like, it gets to the point where it's not even ethical. It's that these systems that are established now have to fail because without going into the math, we don't need to go into the math element. It's not important right now. We're going to keep on the script. This is the new pathology. This is the logic of occult eugenic Nazism that survived the war and found new homes. We see it in the post-war operations like paperclip and the use of masonry as a perfect cover, where an emphasis on hierarchy, secrecy, and proximity to an arbitrary, powerful god justifies the abuse. Tactics of psychotronics, ritual abuse, and sexual violence are used to degrade a person's dignity to the point of absolute compliance, to raise a program, not a person. This is the cost of absolute obedience. The greatest tool of compliance is not just these compromat tools, but also the carrot and the stick. So you're going to also offer access to authority, offer money. One of the Finder's things says, wealth, sexual gratification. I think it says like community. I don't remember. It's a really weird ad. I should read them again. The rational way out. Cooperate, equilibrium. The only way to win this game is to change this game or to stop playing it. We need to move. Well, the thing is, though, it's just like it needs to be collaborative. Otherwise, it's just like everyone just keeps losing and one person just isolates themselves over and over and over again. That's not a win for anybody. We need to move to a cooperate, equilibrium. Like, the planet will collapse soon. That's the other thing. It's not just the economy. The planet is going to collapse because of a massive amount of wastefulness and because a lot of concealment of the level of problem that the environment is actually in. There's also a CO2 album that will create a... We are in a climatary epoch called the Holocene that, is really ending, and a new one called the Anthropocene is beginning, which is the human-dominated climatary period. But we don't have the management to handle a climatary shift like the one that's being induced. We are being driven off a cliff through massive waste, through the exportation of our industry to China as a means to wage trap the consumer class. So there are no jobs, but the financialization of survival in the United States is the most advanced in the world. So you have to pay more to live here than anywhere else, and there's not very many opportunities to live without some cost, but there's not a lot of opportunity to work for a decent living. The minimum wage is literally less than slave wage. We've got a system of large, investment banks buying about a third of all of the houses in the retail market. So that keeps inflating housing values in a way that keeps them inaccessible. And that plus the 2008 scam has made this a society forced into renting and then exploited deeply by the rent. It's utilizing housing insecurity as a major tool for political and personal exploitation and manipulation. And I mean, it's very, very personal and intimate in Port Huron because of the types of psychological operations and exploitational manipulations that are going on here. It's fascinating to find out just how this is being orchestrated, but suffice to say, what matters is the future. We need to move to a cooperate type system, a post-zero-sum game system. The solution is what I call the altruism economy. It's a financial system based on proof of value and production. So the economy ultimately is bolstered by a cryptocurrency, really a crypto money, because it is AI mediated and exclusively produced in coordination with the production, in coordination with an asset of value. It starts with pool mining, but then moves into physical assets. It's meant to, so its valuation is set by its relationship to fiat. It's an AI-mediated mining tool that then mints another asset, and then also subsequently it's a series of smart contracts, durable assets, and perishable assets that all represent physical assets that are minted as those objectively valuable assets are themselves produced using an AI platform arbiter, which also then creates the labor, because there are the amount of untapped resources in the United States, the amount of easily converted to productive land. The one example that I like to use is maple syrup. Just in Michigan, there's $1 billion. It's so insane. $1 billion in untapped sugar bush, just maple trees, in the state of Michigan, and they're all over. There are people, with 1 acre plots that, if you were to utilize smart contracts, you could turn into a liquid income for the homeowner that's non-destructive, and it would be established through a smart contract that would itself be a durable asset in this paradigm that would produce the perishable asset of the syrup and create a constant revenue stream for the landowner, which would be stabilized and would in turn stabilize the US dollar through so the AI mines the cryptocurrencies like the ones that are proof of work, like Ethereum, and the big one that everyone knows, Bitcoin. And so by mining those, it's proving the AI's inherent value, and so it mints the HAL coin as the proof of value coin, which is also minted if X amount of syrup is created or whatever, and this is then stabilized against all of the world's fiat currencies, and is stabilizes them by creating a bottom to them, and that as long as the value is above a certain value, the AI will exchange and then create a stabilizing effect. But anyway, the manufactured minted HAL coins in the crypto money then creates this sort of three-way financial stabilization system where the cryptocurrencies provide the initial value and assign value to the HAL coin system, which then, is valued through its relationship to fiat, and this will in turn create a stabilizing effect. I guess it doesn't matter. I guess also, too, the possible better name would be called Anchor. We use AI to bridge the fiat crypto world with a new production-oriented crypto money. This currency is backed by real physical value brought into production through hyper-efficient AI coordination and AI, as the arbiter. So it's not always AI doing the productivity, but it's AI that's observing the production. So rather than having someone, everything becomes traceable and accountable automatically, and it's a good, and then all of these smart contracts then pay out as they pay in automatically. there are a lot of cool ways that this would work on a macroeconomic level, and that's what's really cool about it. I guess just understanding how it works is the most important thing at first. But case study, the unintended. Okay, we talked about that. An intelligent, non-contradictory AI coordinates the entire vertical labor, resource management, and finance. This AI managed production then backs the currency, providing its value in a way that speculation never could. This is a rational way out. It uses the best of technology to address the worst of the current system. It creates a system where cooperation is the only logical path to stability and wealth creation, and also it's the only way to stabilize our currency. Now, it's important, though, that this AI can't be owned or wielded. It has to be an absolutely neutral AI, and that's what's very important about this idea, is that it can't be like GPT-4, where it's getting censored or manipulated for one side or the other. It has to be an absolutely neutral AI, which is very possible. It's actually easier than making a biased one, but that has to be the actual goal. All right, part 4, the final stance and appeal. I have offered a solution, and I have documented threats against my person, sabotaging, gang stalking, the gaslighting, the institutional, what do they call it, capture, oh my gosh, the financial streaming, and backing, oh my gosh, the myriad of child sexual exploitation elements and trafficking, the corrupt, we'll just say, parts, the capacity to implement the solution. There's no single solution, but at the same time, this is an ultimate, the next couple months are going to be very interesting in American history. I just hope that that the country and the leaders at large are up to the task to steer this in the right direction, rather than just continuing to kick the can and create more debt. This economic system doesn't make any sense. It from every angle, it's been not only corrupted, but it also, once we separate into this fiat currency and started flooding the currency with money, there's no way out in our current system other than just flooding more money into the system. That's the only thing that the Fed is capable of doing, and the Treasury is capable of doing. They just keep doing it. IORB, QE, TARP, CARES, there's so many other examples. It's just like there's just a constant stream of BS to deferring losses as gains. Non-GAAP, the Treasury and the Fed and all of these government agencies are using non-standard accounting practices as a means to hide a shit ton more debt. Like crazy more debt. They're saddling the shit out of this government with debt. And your fucking dollars, the dollars that the American people at large keep backing, a lot more than they're letting on. And it's already, it's so bad what they're letting on, but it's a lot worse. It's so bad that talking about how bad it actually is probably, like, it's gotten so bad that to talk about how bad it actually is could arguably be considered irresponsible, because it could trigger a rapid runaway inflationary period. But the thing is that that's already happening, and we need to actually fix it rather than pretend like it's not happening. This has been doomed to fail the whole time. But once it became fiat, it became so doomed to fail. This is an unsustainable economic paradigm. It is not a natural one. Wealth of Nations was not some it creates a destructive, competitive, and wasteful economic paradigm that siphons very, very few resources to the top and automates a scarcity machine. This is worst utilization of resources imaginable. This is essentially taking a planet and trying to destroy it as fast as you can for the appeasement of a couple people to ride around in helicopters and apparently rape kids. Like, what? That's not a good enough excuse for the amount of plastic in the ocean, you know? And they're all related. Those are all related things. The manipulation of Chinese salaries, for example, the manipulation of their currency, the fact that the Chinese are an insular economy, so the currency's values manipulated in the international market so that they're able to dominate this industry that we essentially exported to them. So, you know, the buying power of these Chinese in China with the yuan, they're making more money than our minimum wage, you know, kind of considerably. But you know, the money objectively in the international market's worth considerably less. But the thing is, though, like, the only reason you would do that, like, the only reason that our infrastructure was exported to China was to fuck over the middle class so they'd be more politically malleable and controllable because they wouldn't have any real means of, like, income, and the unionization was destroyed by Reagan, like, and that turned the DNC into another corporate-backed party. We have a one-party system that's been orchestrated through a bunch of political plays, what you call dirty tricks, that have altered the morality to advantage a sociopathic control system intentionally. Like, listen to the Nixon tapes. Listen to the Nixon tapes. I mean, then you'll just realize, oh my gosh, this entire country has fallen for a effed up, pretty Nazi-esque plot. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I wasn't expecting to go into all that, and there's a lot of sweeping stuff in what I just said, and I guess I need to draw it back because I need to stick to the facts and build. Who gives a shit? I need to though the important thing is to build. I have now so many sources from within active CIA that there's no denying what I have, but there is negotiating on how, because again, the future is what matters, not a litany of what was fucked up in the past, but what's important is to start anew and start fixing problems instead of continuing to make new ones, because there's not much time. There's just not. And if you think, like, I don't know what you could, where you could be mentally if you don't realize that at this juncture, that there needs to be a real decisive shift towards something that works rather than something that creates more problems and exploits them. The current paradigm is to, like, foster ignorance to mine it, you know. That's the whole play. That's the whole economy. It's become an idiocracy. Because a lot of people, they're put into situations where they're not even allowed to voice what they know, which is that they're forced in a fucked up exploitation fucking deception, and they know it, but they can't say anything because they'll be punished. That is running so widely across this country in so many different ways. That's not first world. It's not. You can't have, your intelligence agency can't run around poisoning and hitting with V2K, just trying to say, oh, you know, literally. Oh my gosh. I don't know what I should say and what I shouldn't. That's the thing that's crazy, is because, like, I could go on for hours and hours and hours. It's so bad. And so many things that the public thinks. It's brutal. But it's not so much, I'll leave you there. Have a great day, everybody. I am just trying to realize very simple things. A future that isn't dystopic, but most importantly, right? myself and the people I care about. No more deception, right? No more manipulation of the comms. I don't know, I've been busy, obviously, so I haven't been particularly vigilant as to the nature of the, fallout of the last couple rounds of encrypted comms, but I'm hoping we're moving in the right direction, because if not, I'm going to be moving quickly. I just can't continue to try and offer good faith and a commitment to preventing a catastrophe while being fucked with, and these little baby shambles, effing, psyoping, gang stalking, gaslighting, fucking frog voice bullshit, I think maybe we're starting to understand who we're dealing with. I think. Alright. The most important thing, though, is the future, not competition or whatever. I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to prevent an undesirable future for everyone. And I'm trying to use whatever is at my disposal to do that, because in the process of trying to figure out who the fuck was interfering with my communications with someone I care about deeply, I uncovered so many things that need addressing. And I guess, though, how they need addressing is the future is what matters, I'm not saying we need to litany and punish. What we need to do, though, is we need to start making solutions, not fostering problems and exploiting them. Because, this is not a simple situation, but it can be made to look like that, I suppose. I mean, it depending on how you look. Everything's relative, right? But we all have choices too.